Hi guys, welcome to the microbiome overview. This is just going to be a basic introduction of what the microbiome is and why the heck it matters. In our other modules, we'll really get deeper into specific disease states and the nitty-gritty of strains and research and how it's affecting, a variety of health concerns. But this is just kind of your basic overview. So let's get going. So the microbiome is the collection of microbes that live in and on us. So this is all of these microbial cells, bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoa, all those dudes. We have about 10 to 1 bacterial to mammalian cells. Basically, that just means for every single one of your human cells, you have 10 bacterial cells in or on you. So 10 times as many is kind of the working number right now that scientists are observing. Then we have a percentage down here. So that one above is kind of a ratio. This one, 99 to 1, is a percentage. So the percentage of bacterial DNA to mammalian DNA, meaning with 100% of your DNA that's in and on you, 99% of the variety of that DNA is from bacterial sources. The 1% is your human DNA, which honestly is really encouraging for me because I can't help you change your DNA, even with all of the amazing research on nutrigenomics and how to address epigenetic switches and all of those things. You can't actually change your DNA to make it be different, but we can significantly alter the bacteria and therefore the 99%, right, of the DNA that's in and on you. And you're about to learn why that's kind of a cool thing. So 3 to 5 pounds. So that's about how much these guys weigh. So if you took all of the bacteria and all of the microbiome off of you and measured it, it'd be about that weight, just about the same weight as your brain. So I sometimes get people freaking out, right? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of bugs, especially when you think of it that way, like bugs. But really, while I could spend an hour talking about each one of these different sites and the types of bacteria that are found there and how they matter, which, we'll get to that in our other more in-depth modules after this. But I just want to give you an overview and just kind of see the different areas on the body where bacteria and the microbiome really plays an important part in our health. So as I suspected, you're full of bacteria. We're gonna have to throw you away now. No, don't do it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater or the sponge, the bacteria out with the sponge, I guess is another way to describe it. So sometimes I get people thinking, oh my gosh, no wonder we're so sick. We're full of bacteria. The problem is, as now you're going to learn in this course, is that the problem is not too much bacteria. Sometimes it's not enough, or not enough of the right ones. So we're going to really take this topic deeper, but I don't want you to freak out and feel like, you know, you need to go drink some antimicrobial hand wash or antibacterial. Like don't go have a Purell bath. Just hold off a second, finish the video. So I'm going to take you to biology class here for a minute, remembering that all of these relationships that occur with our environment and bacteria being a massive part of our health and wellness, as you're going to see, is that it's the type of relationship we're looking for. Like I said with SpongeBob, don't throw all the bacteria out with the sponge. Just because we've got an overgrowth of one or another doesn't mean we want none. So what we're looking for, and the way I'll be talking about it throughout the course, is commensal bacteria, right? We want to be benefiting from our relationship with these bugs. And if it's not working out, if we're not having enough of a diversity and quantity of commensal bacteria, then that's when we start having a problem. So I love this quote by a really smart dude. He says properly managing all of these different species is what we call good health. And I love the analogy of, you have a busy life, you have activities and extracurriculars and potentially a job or watching kids or whatever else it is that you do. You have to make sure you feed yourself and sometimes get a shower and, walk the pets or whatever else it is. And we consider properly managing all of those things and keeping all of those things, um, moving forward is like a good life. So I want you to think about it that way as your health is basically properly managing all of these different aspects. And one of the big ones is going to be the microbiome. But we're not going to negate dealing with stress and getting physical exercise, all of which actually has a significant effect on the microbiome. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how all of this research kind of emerged. And while it's not completely a new idea, this human microbiome project is one of those things that really triggered advancement in the scientific research. So in 2008, the National Institute of Health put together this big project, and they were looking to understand the microbial genome sequences. They wanted to figure out how to characterize, what this microbiome really was. They wanted to understand the relationship between diseases and changes in the microbiome, develop new technologies, maybe come up with some sort of like resource manual, like is there an app for that kind of a thing? And then to also understand like the ethical implications of doing the research itself. Um, I love how it actually started. So it really came out, this big microbiome project came out of, or on the heels of, I guess you could say, the Human Genome Project. So I don't know how many of you remember that, but that was a project where they were sequencing the human genome and they were going to make all these amazing correlations and figure out, you know, how to prevent breast cancer and predict genes for Alzheimer's and all of these things. But what happened was, they finished this massive project in the Human Genome Project and realized they had way more questions than they had answers to. And so when they expected about 100,000 genes um, based on the protein and enzymatic reactions that our bodies go through, they actually came out with that humans have between 25 and 30,000 genes. And to put that into perspective for you, that's actually less than a carrot or even a fruit fly. So if that doesn't like give you an aha moment, I don't know what will. So all of a sudden they're like, okay, how are all of these processes happening? Because we can see the processes, we understand the reactions that are occurring. Who's doing these jobs if it's not our own genes? So what they discovered in the microbiome project was that bacterial protein coding genes, so these bacteria dudes that have protein coding genes, are 360 times more abundant than our own human genes. So proteins, right? Fairly important building blocks for blood, bone, muscles, cartilage, skin, needed for enzymes, hormones, body chemical reactions. So much of um, our body's reliance on these protein coding genes are microbial. Then they realized that the digestion of fats, which have a massive or is done mostly by the microbial metabolic activities, especially for short chain fatty acids, for example, they're not even always provided by the same bacterial species. So it's kind of like um, there's one guy that does a certain job in our body, like a certain gene does this job. But when it comes to bacterial sequencing and bacterial functions, we've outsourced so many of these um, different jobs to the bacteria that they have multiple different strains doing the same job. Then they realized that even though the human microbiome changes over time and can be affected by like disease states and medications, it's always striving to reach equilibrium, just like our bodies are always striving for homeostasis. The microbiome is trying to get back to a healthy balance. Um, so that's what we're going to help the body do in this microbiome makeover project. We're going to support the biome so that it can heal. So here's a little just a synopsis for you of our first part of this lecture, and that is we are inhabited by as many as 10,000 bacterial species. These cells outnumber those which we consider our own by 10 to 1 and weigh all in told about 3 pounds, the same as our brain. So together they are referred to as our microbiome, and they play such a crucial role in our lives that scientists have begun to reconsider what it means to be human. Such a great quote by Michael Spector, who's an American journalist and staff writer for lots of great publications, New Yorker, lots of science research that he's, kind of helped to translate to the public from the Washington Post and lots of other places. So um, amazing that some experts believe that over time our bodies have outsourced essential functions to the microbiome. So not just like, well, they can help us or harm us, but actual essential functions that we need for survival have been outsourced to the microbiome. So why does it matter? It's cool that it's there. It's cool that it does some stuff, but does it really have an implication for your life? Absolutely. So here's just a very, very short list of the things that we're going to be addressing in the rest of the Microbiome Makeover course, but here's a few that may help it feel a little bit more relevant to you. Let's talk about, how about depression? So with over 90% of your serotonin being created in your gut, you've got to believe that the microbiome has a pretty important job in helping maintain your mood. It is really hard to be happy when you've got a destroyed gut that's not producing serotonin. That's where it comes from. What about pain? So inflammatory cytokines are massively regulated by the microbiome, and these little inflammatory cytokines, which we'll go into depth about these in the pain and inflammation module, but they are like little bullets, and they do not distinguish between good and bad, either bacteria or cells or receptors or whatever, when they're shooting around the body. And the microbiome plays a massive impact on regulating those, on making sure that there's some kind of checks and balances so they don't just go crazy and wreak havoc on the body. Allergies is a huge one. We'll talk about malfunction of tight junctions where, as the allergy epidemic is on the rise and, kids are suffering from numerous allergies, that we have these intolerances that turn to sensitivities and full-blown allergies that threaten lives and cause lots of problems, even for adults that don't realize they have underlying inflammation from allergies. What about cravings? Oh man, I'm not going to give you a total pass on this one, but I do want you to know that microbes actually can signal your brain with regulatory hormones so that you crave the food those microbes need to survive. And you'll never guess what commensal bacteria craves. It's going to be sugar, right? It's going to be starchy carbs. That's what they need. So they're telling your brain, our body needs this because they have got a lot of self-interest. They've got skin in the game, so to speak, because they want to survive. I have a great slide on our weight loss module, but metabolism is huge. I'll explain to you the Cinderella story of the two mice, right? The Jacques and or Gus and Jack or Jacques, and explain how the types of bacteria that you have can actually regulate how your body can or cannot lose weight regardless of diet and exercise. So what we're looking for in the microbiome is diversity. This is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. It's not like having a certain amount is the most critical part. What we need is a vast diversity. People that eat traditional foods, like traditionally prepared, so they're not eating, boxed and canned foods all the time. They're eating homegrown or locally sourced, in season, fruits, vegetables, proteins from all kinds of sources, they have a 50% greater diversity in their microbiome, in the types of bacteria that are in and on them. So that's just going to give you a little bit of a clue to moving forward why fermenting is such an important part of restoring balance to the microbiome. It's this diversity that promotes resilience, which leads to our health. So what happens when things don't go right, right? So dysbiosis is basically just the fancy word we use for imbalance. It's that microbial imbalance in and on the body that messes up the microbiota. It also helps, so here's a great way to think about it. So there's only so much real estate on your skin and in your gut. And whoever has the biggest real estate is getting the most attention. It's kind of like this squeaky wheel. So if you've got a giant overgrowth of a certain type of bacteria that when it's in a normal proportion has a job and something it needs to be doing, but at this quantity is pushing out other strains, is quieting down other bacteria that need to be doing jobs to maintain your health, then we've got what's called dysbiosis. We have an imbalance. As far as the microbiome comes, as it's cultivated, it's typically formed by or before the age of 3. So we look at cesarean section, C-sections. Breastfeeding is amazing for the microbiome. There's like specific bacterial strains are created in the breast milk based on the needs of the infant from the saliva. I mean, that feedback loop is amazing. Our bodies are incredibly intelligent. But then, of course, we have lots of risk factors for an underdeveloped microbiome. Stress is one of those big ones. So either trauma, physical or emotional, at a young age can significantly alter the biome. Birth control pills, refined foods, we'll get all into depth with all of these topics in the other modules. But they all have a significant detrimental effect on the microbiome. Maltodextrin, if you look at any packaged food that has more than about 5 ingredients, there's a good chance you'll see maltodextrin or something that's similar to it but has a different name. Maltodextrin impairs cellular antibacterial responses, so it suppresses the growth of good bacteria and actually increases the risk of the harmful overgrowth because it suppresses the intestinal antimicrobials for those those bacteria that we don't necessarily want to be the squeaky wheel and to be getting all the attention. So now what do you do? So now I've freaked you out about all of the, all the bugs and the imbalance. So what are you going to do? Well, let's start here. The number one factor of what bacteria you grow in your gut is the food that you put in your mouth every day. So who are we feeding in there, right? Just like the cravings were the certain bacteria calling out to the brain to get fed. Well, you know what we can do? We cannot feed those dudes. So this is going to be the end of the first presentation. I can't wait to really get into the nitty-gritty of all of the details and really the ins and outs. We're going to go deep into what you put in and on yourself and how that affects the microbiome, understanding exactly those chemical reactions that are occurring, and then what you can actually do for it, like step by steps. A great start is to get some diversity in your food. We're looking for color. We're looking for texture. Different colored fruits and vegetables have different polyphenols and micronutrients associated with those types of colors. So when they say eat the rainbow, they're being serious. You have a much better chance of being able to heal your body and your microbiome quickly by getting a diverse range of colors and textures into your body on a daily basis. So that's a great start. Go to the store, pick something out like a beautiful piece of dragon fruit or something that you've never had before. Have it be an adventure. It doesn't have to be, agonizing to change up your lifestyle. You don't have to go through your pantry and throw everything away that has, a smidge of sugar in it, but start shifting the balance by what you put in your mouth every day. All right, let's get cracking.